Have a seat. Are we live?
Are we live?
Yeah, we are live. Oh, hello.
Hi. Just hanging out here. Welcome.
Hello, the internet.
Welcome back. Welcome back to.
You're not on.
Let's, because Ken turned me off earlier.
Nope, there we go.
There we go. Am I on now? All right, let's try this again. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back to the lab at Canvas. This is our third night.
Third night.
We're almost there. Tonight, I'm so excited. Oh, I am Amy. This is Ken. Just in case.
You need to reintroduce
you need
us.
to know who we are. Super excited about tonight. But before we dig into what we're going to do tonight, a little housekeeping. If you are watching the live stream, make sure you click the link that takes you to the YouTube platform. That's where you can engage in the chat. Lynn is standing by. She'll be chatting with you and also passing along your comments and questions. So please type those in, share us your thoughts. We can't wait to hear what you have to say. Now, what are we doing tonight, Ken?
Well, so the third meeting, our third meeting is actually going to be kind of different than the third meeting that the lab rats had. In the third meeting, we actually went off the stage and we did an exercise where we took a look at Canvas physically.
Yes.
And looked around and really started to ask ourselves what images of God are around the Canvas campus.
Right.
And where I recommend...
We won't be doing that tonight.
We won't be doing that. But I recommend that, especially anybody online later, we have the episode up. We have the episode available for you to watch. And you can kind of take a look at what the lab rats did as they walked around. Fascinating discovery of who we are as a physical location and what images of God showed up there. Mm-hmm. The other thing we did that evening is what we're excited about this evening. We're going to take that exercise, we're going to bring it here. And you want me to set it up?
Go for it.
All right. So what we've been talking about, of course, since the very first meeting is our own personal images of God as well as the culture. And, you know, we had different examples and different ideas that we brought to the table.
Personal images could run the gamut.
Yep. And then in the cultural image, it was pretty much
There's a pretty pervasive cultural image.
The Zeus Caesar image as well. Last session, we talked about, with some really big words, the origins of some of this stuff in terms of aniconism and the traditioning and the Roman takeover of the imagery and the Renaissance and the impact it had on that. So what's interesting is in the third meeting of the lab rats, we went through this exercise where we showed a video of someone who is pretty much the exact opposite of what our culture would recognize as an image of God. And that's what we want to do live today in our session. So we're not going to be watching a whole lot of videos of what our team did prior. We're actually just going to watch the documentary that we shared, and we're going to dig into this, and we're going to go and really start to talk about and uncover what does this evoke in us when we look at someone who is 180 and miles away from the image that we may know or we may think about. really excited about where that conversation is going to take us. So,
And as you're watching the video, I want you to try to imagine a world in which this little girl is the image of God rather than the Zeus image. Let's just flip those out, right? Plop Zeus out, plop in Darine, and what would our world look like if that was the image that we had grown up with and known and had influenced our culture rather than the Zeus image? So.
All right, let's roll it.
Darine! Darine!
اسمي دارينا، عمري 9 سنين. بشتغل بجيب مصاري لأهلي. أنا جيت من سوريا على لبنان لأن كان في قوم الطيارات بيضربوا. الشغل أكثر أصعب شيء الشمس. رفيقتي نهال عم تشتغل كمان تعاون أهلها. نشتغل أهلك. أنا كل يوم بروح الشغل الساعة 4 ضل هنيك كومة.
عام 2019 والأزمات تتتالى الواحدة تلو الأخرى على لبنان، فانهيار القطاع المصرفي والليرة اللبنانية إضافة إلى جائحة كورونا وانفجار المرفأ أدى بالاقتصاد اللبناني إلى تسجيل نمو سلبي مرتفع في ناتجه المحلي للعام الثاني على التوالي بلغ 20.3.
أنا عندي رفيقتين بالمخيم، بحبهم يونسوني لعب إحنا وياهن، أنا وياهن وأخواتي. شهر ردوني في كورونا. المدرسة كانت هي أحلى شيء، يعني درسونا أنا ضايقت بس بطلت أروح المدرسة.
تعالي يا جنى تعالي. تعالي ليش زعلانة؟ حمد
شو عم تعملي؟
عم بكتب اسم ماما، عم بكتب اسم خالتي. بابا. كتبت اسم خالتي. أنا عايشة بالخيمة، أنا وأمي وبابا وأخواتي وخالتي. رزق. لما ما جت كورونا كنت فرحان بالمدرسة، كلها ياخذوني على المدرسة. أنا بحب بس أكبر بحب أصير أنسة ودرس الأولاد عشان يتعلموا. المدرسة كتير حلوة.
هلا كريمة يا بنتي تروحي على المدرسة ومكرونة هلا أنت بالمدرسة.
بس أكبر بصير بشتغل بالبطاطا بالحج.
بتحبي تقولي للعالم؟
أنا رسالتي للعالم إني بدي أجي على المدرسة.
So,
Oh, my goodness.
is that me?
Might be you.
So we should mention that this film is by the Norwegian Refugee Council. So,
If you want to look in further, you can check them out
yes.
and support their cause. So, thank you for sitting through that. As you were watching that, we were asking you to not just watch it, but really take a look at Darine and start to think about just what if she was the image of God. And I think I want to start with seeing what your thoughts are, having watched that. Let me grab the mic. Anybody want to start us off? Very shy. I'll wait.
Well, I'll start us off with an easy one.
All right.
The mere fact that Darine as a girl would change our language about God completely. We wouldn't use he pronouns, we would use she pronouns. if that was our image. And the fact that Darine is young, I think that we would see wisdom in youth way more than we see wisdom in youth now. That would be another image change. And I also think that we would have a very different understanding of what power means or is. We would define it very differently if it's in this face rather than the face that we typically see it in our culture.
Right. The very word power defaults us to, structured power, right? The Caesar type of power, the Zeusian type of power.
Mm-hmm.
And when we look at Darine, maybe in your list of adjectives, power wouldn't be the top 10, if 20. And yet my argument would be she's very powerful as somebody who represents. Actually, I'm going to let you guys talk. What do you guys think? You all think she represents?
I do want you to share your pie story with us.
I don't know if I remember that completely, but
Ooh, I'm having issues, sir.
You are crackling.
Thank you.
that was my joints. I'm sorry. One of the things that I really liked about that story that I remembered is the way she narrates her story. She's part of a community. And I remember when we watched this the first time, I was thinking if we would read our own text and pick out these little subtle things that are revealed to us in our own text, because God reveals himself in that same way. It's part of a community. So there's this idea of shared power, of shared potential. I like that word a little bit better. That's already in our story that we all overlook when we think of the wrong image. But when we think of this image, it's so easy to go back and read the text and go, oh, it was there the whole time. I just wasn't really looking for that. So I remember that. I liked that.
So could you elaborate on what part of the text do you think pops out?
Well, I mean, right at the very beginning of our creation stories, God uses us language, right? Let us make man in our image. So already there's a plurality there, a community. As he reveals himself in each of the additional texts that come out, there's always this hint that God is with us, right? He's not just revealing himself to us, but he's residing with us and in us, which I just think is beautiful language. And when you start looking for it, you see it everywhere.
Does anybody else have any reactions to seeing Darine?
I was thinking about like the children that I've interacted with in my life and how many moments I've had where they've taught me something or revealed something to me or just asked a question that was like, yeah, why do we do that? Or why is life like that? You know, when you have to start explaining those things, how those are the moments where you can see and experience God through children and how powerful that can be. And just looking at her made me think of that there's so much we can learn from children that we often just kind of dismiss as like, you know, they're little kids, they're not there yet. But there's so much there that we can learn about life. And then just a thought as I'm watching that, I'm wondering how much, like if Christianity was based on a God that was a young girl child, like how much traction would the religion have gotten at that time? like, would it have grown? And even just in the person of Jesus, the people were looking for a mighty king savior, and that cycle that repeats over and over, looking for this mighty king savior. And even Jesus, a young, able-bodied man, wasn't that image that they were looking for. So just something I was thinking about.
The point you bring up is something that I think we're wanting to talk about. And so I think we should just get right into it, which is, we talked about in previous sessions that the adaptation to the Roman constructs of power and Christianity kind of going side by side to that. And ultimately, this Zeusian image of God, this Caesar image of God kind of went side by side to that as well. And somewhere along the way, we kind of lost the path of potentially a very Jesus, like, no hierarchical power path. And I think you bring up a fantastic point in that it begs the question of how do we separate our journey as Christians from Jesus that we know, who, refugee, no power, no wealth, not what everybody expected, and how we got to here. And how, if you look at Darine, she's not that different than Jesus when you compare her and Jesus and a Caesar-like image. I just think I think it's interesting. I mean, it sounds like that was kind of the path or the area you were going.
Yeah, definitely, along the same lines. And like I said, she's a young girl. Jesus was an able-bodied man. I think that already gave him a little bit of a leg up on her. But
Well, it gave her, obviously, in the world we live in, it gave him a leg up. But in a world where Darine is the image of God, how does that change things? Like, how do we see people differently, look at people differently, with a different image in our head of God, right?
that would be really hard to flip on its head, because we all start off as children and we look to our parents for guidance and strength and wisdom. So it would be a difficult thing to then flip it to look to children for guidance and strength and wisdom. And even as adults, I think we're still always seeking that feeling of safety and security and strength that we had when we looked at our parents maybe at a certain time in our lives. So that big, strong parent figure, father figure, mother figure, it would be hard to separate that from the thing that we're seeking in a powerful deity.
I wonder how many children, though, would walk around with more confidence, agency, and authority over their lives from an earlier age if they believed that they had every right to all the rights that everyone else had rights to. I wonder what that would do for us.
Sounds scary. Well, as a mother, do you think? I know you have children, so as a mother, do you think that's something that you could parent into your children?
It's definitely something I'm trying to. Yeah, I mean, and I gotta say, it's not an easy task considering the messages that the world is constantly teaching them and telling them. There's a lot of stuff that I'm constantly trying to combat.
And I think kind of going and taking what you said a little bit further, we have been surrounded by a culture that says that we do want to seek protection from those that are physically stronger, are more have more resources, right? And it's hard. I think it's really hard to imagine a situation where, as a culture, as a society, as the human race, we don't look for that, but we look for, excuse me, we look for connection like she has, or the communal bond that they have for each other to work together, to nourish each other, to provide for each other. What I find really fascinating is that the more I watch Darine, the more it challenges what I think I know and what I think I believe. And where does that come from? Why does it make me so uncomfortable to think of Darine as an image of God? And what does that unpack in me and the things that I may need to unlearn, or at least take a look from a different perspective, right? You're giving me a look. Oh.
So I'll pop up in the back because I don't see anybody online.
Can't hear you.
Are you okay?
No. Here, use this one. Come sit with us if nobody's
Sit down
online.
for a second. Yoram, watch and let us know if anybody chats in.
I think we have to be a little bit careful
Okay.
when watching something like this, because Jesus did, in his time here, have a certain kind of power. He didn't lord that power over anybody, but he did have a certain kind of power. He had the power to heal. He had the power to forgive. He had the power. So if we go too far and picture God as a little girl with absolutely no power, complete vulnerability, I think there's something to be gained by that, but I think we need to be careful not to go too far, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, what if we don't go that far? Give her the exact same power that Jesus had. It's just a different face.
That makes a whole lot of difference to me. Watching the first thing, as I was watching it, I'm thinking, but it's not an accurate picture of at least who I see God, because God does have power. He just uses that power for love, and the power that he has is the power of love, or she, or whoever you want to call God, has is the power of love. So, which Darine has as well, but not the agency to make the kind of difference that Jesus could make with that love.
I mean, Darine puts us in a headspace of seeing a different kind of looking culture. But ultimately, we're going for the image, right? And everything that surrounds that image. She can speak with authority, wisdom, heal people, but she looks like that. What would that do for our society?
Oh, 10.
10.
Yeah, 10 has 10.
Well, all right, I got the mic. So, one of the things I started considering was when Jesus was born, at the time of his birth, right? The Magi came over. Jesus then was fully God, fully human, as a baby. Jesus, if we take the next logical conclusion, then Jesus as a child, fully God, fully human. Jesus as an adolescent, as a teenager. And sure, his public ministry doesn't start until 30 years when he is being baptized in the Jordan. But Jesus was fully God and fully human all the way from inception, birth, growing up. And again, we don't have many stories of the time when Jesus was a wee little lad, but that was still fully human, fully God at that point. And I double-checked with Kirk to make sure I wasn't being fully heretical on this one. So that's just the thought that I had.
Well, I mean, expand on that a little bit. Are you essentially saying if we were to take a slice in the time period before the baptism of Jesus, we would have an image of somebody who was young and like Darine? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
So, I mean, if you go to spoil and shout out the full video, you'll see my full struggles if you watch the video of how much I struggle with the concept of a powerless God or a person that's not even able to take care of themselves or their own family, and how that lack of physical manifestation of power, to me, if you're not able to protect or save or care for yourself, how then are you able to care for others, humanity, in the world? And I still struggle with that. But at the same time, watching this again and being reconfronted with it again, Jesus was a baby, fully human, fully God, nursed by Mary, taken care of by Mary, raised by Joseph and Mary, through the entire time, still fully human, fully God. And so it is something to remember that the one thing that I try to fight myself all the time is to not limit God, not put box in a God, and so then to understand that God has had the full human experience, and that's one of the parts of Jesus that's so important to us, that he is fully human, fully understands us. So then he was fully a child. He was fully a person that was raised by parents. And so that is a very true and real aspect of who Jesus and who God is.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, and pardon my throat, I'm just got over a cold. Tan, you talk about the need for a God with power. I'm curious to hear, when you're looking for particular things that you need from your God, what is the thing that you're like, I need this from my God? When you just think about that, what do I need from my God? What is the first thing that you think of?
I mean, I'll throw in the obvious, right? The elephant in the room. Because in the time of Jesus, they needed a God that can smite. Smite those that don't agree with me, smite those that have enslaved me, smite. And that's power. Like the power to get rid of my enemies.
But what do you need now? What do you want now?
Oh, wait, you mean me?
Yeah, what do you want from your God? What do you, Ken Chan, want from your God?
I don't need that power. I don't want a power to vanquish my enemies. I don't want a power to give me something, or to even, I mean, it's a slippery slope, but for me, I don't even want power to protect me from, evil, or because my definition of evil is not the same as somebody else's definition of evil, and there we go. The defense is going to turn into an offense very easily. And so for me, power has, I don't look for power that has anything to do with a human definition of power. That to me is not the power that I want to connect with in terms of my image of God.
What about a power that's governed by perfect love? All-powerful and perfect love.
Absolutely. That's the power.
That's what I want.
That's what I want in my
God.
I want the power of love. Absolutely.
That's what I want in my God too.
Yeah.
I want the power.
Oh boy.
And then,
Tan's talking. Tan
Yeah.
wants to talk.
and then, so again, perhaps we're just missing definitions, but I really do need to have a God that has the power to wipe out the entire universe, the power to create and to completely eradicate and destroy. But
Why?
then
Why is that
it's
important?
because then it gives him the control, it gives him the agency, it gives him the authority. But the God that I have, the God in my mind, the God that I love, has that power, but then chooses to love, to sacrifice, to create, to give. They have all the capability, they have all the options, but yet what they choose to do is to create.
Come on, Yoram.
I
join
don't
us.
know. This just I have to say something.
Yes.
Because if this is what you want, I guess I saw a different movie. I saw a movie about 9 years girl who lost her house, have to move to another country, live in a tent with I don't know who many, and instead of going to school, spending a day digging up potatoes. That's the God you want? I don't understand this.
No,
Wait, what
he
are
doesn't
you-
want that. He doesn't want that.
Well, but this is the one who has all this power to do the stuff and see what he did.
Oh,
So-
I say. You're right. You're saying the God that has power is
Look at the
caused
result
the
of
results.
this power.
Right.
Or you might say is not doing stuff to prevent this thing from happening. Doesn't matter how you look at it.
Right.
But I don't know, that thing is like, for me, it's like a non-Euclidean geometry. It's a completely different frame of reference for me. So I
Right.
still have a problem of looking at why you think that this girl is an image of God. I'm not sure
No,
I
no.
Do you,
understand this.
would you think that she's an image of God? You're saying you don't see her as an image of God.
No, I see
So what
a
is it?
poor little girl who in a terrible position that somehow still have some hope, which I don't know what she based it on because I don't know how much hope she has. Where is she going to grow up in a few years? I'm very pessimistic for her.
I mean, but I can counter that as well and say Jesus did not have a great upstanding life in his place. When he grew up, he survived a massacre of all the children. He barely survived being killed. He was born in a relatively not extravagant.
So the rest of the world needs to go through the same process, the same terrible thing that he did? I don't understand this
Well, I
frame of
think we
reference.
may be having a.
we move to a different
an-
frame. So that's
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think we're saying that everyone needs to have that experience.
Right.
And I don't even think we're saying that. I think it's less about the actual experience and more about where do we see the image of God? Right? Is Darine a legitimate image of God?
Does she have anything that we would look at and say, I see the spark, I see a familiarity with an image that I can connect to my God? Kirk, you look like you want to talk.
I really
I
don't.
can't wait.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, you do. You crept up slowly.
And then hold on to your thought too.
Yes,
We're
hold
going
on.
to come to you next.
So here would be at least a couple of my nuanced thoughts. One would be that I think, Ken, you're onto something with the understanding of humanity created in the image of God says something about humans bearing some dimension of our personness that is a reflection of the divine person. Whatever makes a person, that personality, which is not the best term, but that thing that makes one a soul is derived from God, and therefore every human is bearing some dimension of that. And I think maybe some of the trouble is that some of the dimensions that were very important at certain moments in time have been literally carved into stone and become the 2 or 3 or 4 dimensions that we rehearse over and over and over again. So I'm kind of with Tan, and that I want a God who is all powerful. I also want that God to have a personhood that does not use that power for the destruction they could. And every time we carve God with big bulging muscles and long beards, and we're kind of re-emphasizing the smite quotient that God possesses, and we lose some of the other pieces that we've sort of fade to the background. When I look at it like a Darine, I see one of the dimensions that I see about God that I think we don't see very often is the innocence of God. I mean, I think we talk about God's sinlessness in terms of purity and righteousness, but as though God is some sort of also kind of grizzled veteran who really understands all the muck and the mire. And I think at one level God does, and at another level, I think there's a certain childlike, God must possess some dimension of childlike innocence to be innocent, to not fully understand why humans do the things we do. Children look at a lot of adult things and think, I just don't get why you guys have to, why can't we all get along? Why are we all fighting in the parking lot? Why are we, and I think God at one level understands why we're fighting in the parking lot, and at another level just doesn't understand. So I think I would maybe lobby for a more multifaceted image of God, many faces of the diamond.
Yeah.
And not just the 2 or 3 or 4 that we tend to focus on. As I would be with Tan in I think those images are correct. They're just not sufficient.
Yeah. And I think if we had time, I think it is about, and maybe next time, it will be about expanding to beyond that. But I think what we love about this exercise is just that extreme pull between what we know of the culture and propping up somebody like Darine and saying, what about her? What aspects of her can we find? And I absolutely agree with you. Innocence is a gigantic one, for sure. You had something you wanted to say. Oh. There it is, right in front of you.
Well, I was just going to say, I think she has some qualities that the God I envision possesses. But I don't think I could, visualize her as I pray or worship. Because, yeah, she's a child. She's not, I don't know. I forgot what I was going to say. But I just want a God that's, to give me comfort and guidance. And I think that Darine has, she could be comforting. She's, somebody said, hopeful. So I think that's a big, quality to have.
Thank you.
James? Michelle? Tina?
Oh, there you go.
I feel, listening to everyone's conversation, I feel like there's in my head, there's a confusion between how they express their power and whether or not they have power. I think that's, for Jesus, I think, subverts the whole idea of what it means to be powerful. When instead of strong arming a man, instead he gets beaten and put on a cross. And I think when you look at the actual definition of power is the ability to influence. And I think it'll go up there, at least from my experience, it definitely feels like there's definitely a lot of power in her, because it's very relatable for me. I have a daughter myself. I grew up. I was a child. I was an immigrant, so not like a refugee, but I found at a young age. Well, I was in America, so I had to be 16. But I also worked in the hut, sun gathering fruits on the vine. But I think I can see definitely an image of God in that. You know, when I see her playing with the other children, it reminds me of my daughter and how my relationship with my daughter moves me to change and to be better. Just the other week, me and my wife were fighting, and as she was quick to come up to me and tell me to like, hey, say sorry to mom and etc. So I'm like, I've been telling you all your life to say sorry to us, but I feel like, yeah, it definitely that was powerful for me because I went up, apologized to my wife, etc. But you know, I didn't need a strong man to like push me into the room and tell her to say sorry. But you know, it was more of a power of having a relationship with my daughter, with my wife. I think I was late, and the last part I seen was like the daughter bringing their family together, and I feel like that's the image of power that we often forget, like the power to bring people together, and I think to move people, not just like smite people, right? How are you actually causing change? And you know, smiting can only do so much. You know, that causes that's behavioral modification. Like you're afraid of this God, rather than are you moved and changed by greater power, right? So I think I had a conversation with a person not too long ago, saying that there's humans have a lot of times what we want from God is something different. We've seen humankind kind of use their power in ways like war, etc., and to bully people, to act a certain way. And what we want is, why do we need that same? Why do we force God to our same means of expressing our powers, right? So why can that be different? And I think that's part of trying to figure out who God is. And I think Jesus pays the path of like, what it means to subvert our understanding of what it means to be powerful. And I guess that conversation continues today, what it means to be powerful, and that doesn't actually mean violence a lot of time, or the physical power, or the power to smite people.
I'll talk for a second. It wasn't so much volunteering as just going to hold it, but since I'm here, I was just thinking, Michelle, you'd be an interesting person to ask about this. I was thinking, this is in some ways it's not a uniquely Protestant issue, but Protestantism struggles because Roman Catholicism and even the Orthodox tradition has outsourced some of these other dimensions of God to the saints. So, there are many things you don't pray directly to God for. You sort of beseech the patron saint to intercede for that particular thing. Now, I don't think that's theologically wise. I don't think that is a lesson in how we ought learn to pray. But I do think it serves a function of fleshing out many more dimensions of humanity, maybe little facets, little ways into speaking to God, relating to God, seeing different elevated humans of all different stripes and personalities and strengths and weaknesses as some sort of intermediary, at least, between it. But you would know more about, and then I think, we put, in many a Catholic cathedral, we put many examples. The bigger the church, the more saints you have carved into it. and you can just make the rounds where you need to be. And for as much as, I theologically curl my toes at that a little bit, I think in my humanity, I can understand why that would serve a very important role. And we Protestants, I think, corrected the theology, but then it came up with nothing to fill the gap. And so we just kept running back to the same, we could carve another Zeus.
So did you want me to react to that?
We want you to react to that.
No.
Yes.
Now I'm reconsidering.
I think you have a point. I have no B+. But I think we have come at this whole question rather backwards, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
And
Ooh, let's hear.
Yeah.
You really want to know?
Yeah.
Oh, totally.
Okay. I think we're looking for something that Judas was looking for, and that we're trying to have a kind of a custom-made vision of God. And God is not going to be contained. And what we're supposed to be doing is worshiping him, her, they, whatever. But the fact that, and this is in reaction to what you're saying too, is that there's so many ways God is. It's our job to find out about him throughout our lives, and the more we look, the more we find. I think there's a verse in the Bible about that.
Yeah.
But I think that we often try to put the cart before the horse and construct for ourselves what God is, as opposed to worship what he is. And I think the difference is that it is not from us to him, it's from him to us, and we have to acknowledge that direction in whatever way we can. So I'm having a really big difficulty understanding the verbiage. What kind of God are you looking for? Well, I'm not looking for any kind of God.
Right.
I'm looking to see God's magnificence and his utter dominion over all of this, because he created it and he knows the beginning and the end, and he knows our beginnings and our ends. He knows when we were conceived in the womb, and he knows the last of our days. And he knows much more how I'm going to go to somewhere across the world and meet somebody who's going to help me achieve what I need to achieve for his kingdom and not for my own purposes. And I think we have to be extraordinarily careful about how we put into words what we create as God, as opposed to what he reveals to us about himself.
Yeah. I mean, this exercise is not about saying, hey, we have Zeus. And
Now let's have Darine.
Now let's add Darine. So it's not about that. I think really what it's about is unpacking, by looking at Darine,
Seeing the impact that the Zeus image has had on our world.
And it's not even just the Zeus image. I think Kirk,
Kirk is right.
It's the entire Roman Catholic structure that, we are kind of still trying to unpack centuries later of, it's the Zeus, but it's the hierarchical structure. It's the idea of power and what that looks like, and your cathedral versus your circle of people, and what does that actually mean, and where is God and all that, and yeah.
Are we jumping the gun? Have you guys talked about the via negativa stuff yet?
Oh,
Is that
God.
a thing?
We're going into Latin.
It just means the negative way. Is there a Greek form of it? And yeah, probably there. Yeah, but that's not the one that everybody uses, the Latin. And it refers to the process of going through this thing and eventually arriving at the realization that we would be far better off to actually talk about what God is not. And to say after I've tried to, I've come to realize that I am trying to mold a deity into the thing that would really feel great to me.
Right.
And every time I try to improve it, I realize it's just personal taste as much as, and like, I'm not sure I've added accuracy. I've only added longing. And I would be better off to say, God is neither male nor female, so that's just out. God is neither short nor tall. That's out. And realizing that you can actually whittle away an incredible number of attributes that we think we have got figured out, and arrive from many of the lowercase saints who came to that practice and that understanding, arriving very back at a kind of Hebrew prophet-y kind of place of like, your ways are not my ways. I was not there when you put the stars in the heaven. I was not there when you sounded the depths of the sea. I was not present at the moment you spoke life into being. You are light beyond light, yet dark beyond dark. You are quiet beyond quiet, but loud, and all I can do is just sort of arrive at the place of speechless awe, but not out of ignorance. I mean, it's a very different, it's one thing to just sort of stare into the dark hole and be like, well, I don't know, a big hole. And another thing to arrive kind of at the end of a very long pursuit to realize that, like, I can stare all I want and realize that I will never see it all. I will never, and that there are many dimensions in the Christian spiritual tradition of kind of a blood, sweat, and tear-filled adolescence and early adulthood to arrive back at childlike faith. Like the ultimate goal is to get back to the, unless you have the faith of a child, you will not enter the kingdom at all. Which, the goal is to get back to the faith of a 4-year-old. It's just that you have to arrive back there having also had to be a 30-year-old, a 40-year-old, a 50-year-old, a 60-year-old. And if you do it right, you will get back to Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. But I mean a lot more by that now than I did when I sang that song when I was 4. But that song is shockingly accurate.
About the church and the saints, I used to think that it was almost blasphemous to have saints. And I was watching an art history movie. And you do? Yeah. And there was a thing where Hitler had confiscated an altarpiece in Krakow or Warsaw, I can never remember which one. It's called the Zeus-like altarpiece. And it was a very big altarpiece made in the Renaissance. And it was made up of individuals who were recognizable to the community of believers. Okay, so Hitler takes it away. And the narrator of the movie says, how can the people access their prayers without this altarpiece? And I thought, heresy, heresy, heresy. They can pray wherever they want. And then I thought about it, and I thought, no, it's a focal point upon which they can begin their prayers and then go on into their own prayers about whatever. So yes, I think the Catholic Church had a nice idea in putting saints and visuals in the church to help people along in their faith. And the Protestants got rid of it for the same reason that I was thinking it was heresy, because they thought it was not particularly conducive to considering the greatness of God. It was limiting God. And both are right.
I mean, I think
Hitler would want to be as far away from the saints as possible.
Well, Hitler just wanted the art for the art's sake, but that's a whole nother topic.
I mean, I think what you all are talking about is at the core of what we've gone through in the last couple of weeks, which is there is this, getting back to this place of, I've done all this work and really it's not going to be fruitful the way I think it's going to be fruitful. I kind of have to go back, right? But at the same time, I think what we recognized when we were going through this with the lab is that there is a particular, that cat's out of the bag. And so there's a part of it, I know you're making a face, but there's a part of it that's out of the bag from the standpoint of, how do we undo from a church standpoint all the layering and stacking and traditioning that has occurred so that collectively maybe we get back to the 4-year-old level, right? The individual journey is going to be challenging. The systemic journey is going to be very long.
And what is our obligation? I mean, we talk here a lot about how we have to go through this personal journey to come to this place of understanding of God, right? And when we get there, we typically lose our images to a certain degree, right? But what then obligation do we owe the culture that doesn't operate with that God, right? And, maybe next week we can actually talk a little bit about what obligations we have and what we might be able to do or not do, or
do less of, do more
do less of, do more of, how move in that direction of talk. But we are done for tonight. I will say, you didn't say anything tonight, hardly.
Yeah, you did. You said some stuff.
Very little.
We'll say it again.
If you want more,
talk about pie. That's why you got to watch the video.
You never talked about pie. Watch the video and hear all about pie.
Hear all about pie.
Yes. So there is a video on the website that talks about that shows what the lab rats did and the process that they walked through, and then we also, as lab rats, did an art project, which you can see here in the sanctuary at Canvas on the back wall, and you can read all about that. And I know it's kind of a funny thing to ask after what Kirk was just talking about and Michelle was just talking about doing things backwards, but I do think it's a fun exercise to think about what image we personally connect with in our minds for God. And I think that it can be very different for very different people. It can be symbols, it can be nature, it can be light, it can be personified images, it can be all sorts of things. And I think it would be really great if anybody would like to share those images with us just to get a new thought or understanding or idea of another aspect of God that we may not personally think about.
One of the things we talked about the first time we got together was that, all of us have these very personal, very different images, but we all kind of keep it to ourselves. And part of this exercise of the art project is to really share and expand all of our different lenses and viewpoints so that, maybe ultimately we get there faster to come back to the 4-year-old if we work together to kind of open up and expand the possibilities and our own understanding.
And if nothing else, it's just an interesting exercise in creation, as Michelle discovered. And you can see her video on the website with her talking about it. I would love for it to be a homework assignment. Yeah, go home, take a few minutes, think about it, create your own image any way that you want. If you want ideas of just jumping off, check out what the lab rats have done online. The videos are there that talk about their process, and it wasn't easy for everybody. This was not necessarily an easy project, but ultimately rewarding for different reasons. So I would love for you all to try it and report back and tell us what you went through as you were trying to do this exercise.
And the next one's going to be 4 hours long, right?
Yeah. I think we're going to wrap up pretty well. Maybe we go a little longer.
But for tonight, we're done.
Yeah.
So thank you all.
Thank you for
very,
joining
very
us.
Much. Thank you for joining us online, if you did. And we'll see you next time, next week.
See you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.